First Contact's harsh truth. High Admiral Vexthor stood at the observation deck of the Craxian flagship Eternal Dominance, his scaled skin reflecting the pale blue light of Earth. His species had conquered every challenge their harsh homeworld had thrown at them, crushing gravity, predators the size of buildings, and atmospheric pressure that would liquefy most species. The Craxians had earned their place as the galaxy's ultimate survivors. Or so they had thought. Another primitive civilization, High Admiral, Science Director Krelzar reported, her claws tapping rapidly across the holographic display. Their technological advancement is modest. Though they've achieved spaceflight, their vessels are crude compared to ours. Vexthor's secondary hearts pulsed with mild interest. Environmental conditions. Gravity at 1 g, atmospheric pressure 1/10 of Craxia Prime. Hardly worth noting. Krelzar's facial scales rippled with dismissal. The dominant species appears to be bipedal endotherms. They call themselves humans. Soft world creatures, Vexthor rumbled. Establish first contact protocols. Let's add their system to the Protectorate before the Syndicate finds them. What followed would shake the foundations of Craxian supremacy. The first meeting was arranged on neutral ground, a mining station orbiting Earth's moon. The human delegation arrived in their bulky spacecraft, wearing what the Craxians considered to be primitive environmental suits. Leading them was Ambassador Sarah Chen, a small female who barely reached Vexthor's chest level. "Welcome to Sol System," she said, extending a hand in what they would later learn was a greeting gesture. "We look forward to peaceful dialogue between our peoples." Vexthor was about to respond when the station's warning sirens blared. A micrometeoroid had punctured the station's outer hull, causing a cascade of system failures. The artificial gravity flickered and died. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, trapping both delegations in the rapidly depressurizing chamber. What happened next would be recorded in both species' historical archives. While the Craxians immediately activated their personal shield generators, standard equipment for their kind, they'd watched in disbelief as the humans sprang into action without hesitation. Ambassador Chen and her team moved with surprising grace in zero gravity, quickly accessing maintenance panels and emergency equipment. "The backup systems are fried," one of the human engineers shouted, already halfway inside an access tunnel. "We'll have to manually reroute power from the auxiliary cores." "Temperatures dropping fast," another human called out. 15 minutes until we hit critical." The Craxians, despite their evolutionary advantages, found themselves watching in stunned silence as the humans worked. Their environmental suits, which Vexthor had dismissed as primitive, proved remarkably adaptable. The humans moved through spaces that would have been impossible for Craxian physiology, their smaller size and flexibility suddenly a decisive advantage. "Permission to assist," Krelzar requested, her scientific curiosity overtaking protocol. "Granted," Vexthor responded, watching as his science director joined the humans in their frantic repair effort. What impressed him most wasn't just their technical improvisation, it was their stamina. As the minutes ticked by, and the temperature continued to plummet, the humans showed no signs of slowing. They worked methodically, efficiently, communicating in short bursts while conserving oxygen. Ambassador Chen emerged from a maintenance shaft, her faceplate frosted over. "We've got one shot at this," she announced. "The manual override requires sustained pressure on 2 separate junctions. The force needed," she paused, looking at the Craxians, "would crush human bones. We'll need your help." Vexthor stepped forward himself. Here, finally, was something his species could handle better. Yet as he applied his tremendous strength to the override mechanism, he noticed something remarkable. The humans didn't stand back. They continued working around him, in conditions that should have frozen their less robust bodies, their movements precise despite the numbing cold. When the systems finally came back online and the crisis was averted, Vexthor found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about species classification. The humans hadn't just survived, they had thrived in a crisis situation, adapting instantly, working cooperatively, and pushing through physical limitations that should have stopped them. "Your species," he said to Ambassador Chen as emergency crews finally arrived, "is not what we expected." Chen's laugh fogged her faceplate. "We get that a lot, High Admiral. Humanity has a long history of exceeding expectations." Later, in his private quarters, Vex Thor recorded his first official report on humanity. His claws hovered over the keypad as he searched for the right words. "Initial assessment of Earth's dominant species requires significant revision," he began. "While their world would be considered hospitable by most galactic standards, the humans themselves defy conventional classification. They possess neither the strongest bodies nor the most advanced technology, yet they demonstrate an unprecedented combination of adaptability, endurance, and problem-solving capability. Most notably, they appear to function at peak efficiency during crisis situations." He paused, then added, "Recommend immediate elevation of human species classification from minimal threat to approach with caution. These beings are not what they appear to be. They are not soft world creatures at all. They are something else entirely." The report would travel up the chain of command, eventually reaching the Craxian High Council itself. By then, however, humanity would have given them many more reasons to worry. The challenge of strength. Supreme Commander Vaxkar of the Craxian Military Council wasn't convinced by High Admiral Vex Thor's report. One isolated incident during a space station malfunction wasn't enough to evaluate a species' true potential. The ancient laws of Craxia demanded more rigorous testing. "The trial of might," he announced to the assembled council. "It is our right as the galaxy's apex species to challenge these humans, to truly understand what they're capable of." The human leadership accepted the challenge with surprising enthusiasm. "We welcome the opportunity for our species to learn from each other," their message stated. What the Craxians didn't understand was humanity's long history of turning tests into opportunities. The trials would take place on Nexus 7, a purpose-built testing facility featuring multiple biomes and environmental conditions. 3 human representatives would face 3 Craxian champions in a series of challenges designed to push both species to their absolute limits. The humans sent an unlikely trio: Sarah Martinez, a mountain rescue specialist; Dr. James Chen, a deep-sea researcher; and Captain Maya Patel, a veteran of the Mars colonization program. None of them possessed the obvious physical prowess of their Craxian counterparts. "These are your champions." Vaxkar's scales rippled with barely concealed derision as he faced the human team. "They appear inadequate." Martinez just smiled. "Looks can be deceiving, Commander. Shall we begin?" The first trial took place in Nexus 7's high-gravity chamber, set to match Craxia Prime's crushing 3G environment. The challenge: retrieve a series of markers placed throughout an obstacle course while wearing standardized environmental suits. The Craxians moved with practiced ease. Their powerful bodies evolved for such conditions. They expected the humans to fail immediately. Instead, they witnessed something remarkable. The humans adopted a collaborative approach. While Martinez took point, using her climbing expertise to plot efficient paths, Chen and Patel worked in tandem, creating improvised pulleys and leverage systems from their equipment. They moved slower than the Craxians, but they kept moving. "Fascinating," Science Director Krulzar observed from the control room. "They're not trying to match our strength, they're finding ways around it." The second trial shifted to the opposite extreme: an underwater pressure chamber simulating the depths of an ocean world. Here, even the Craxians struggled with the intense pressure and complete darkness. But Dr. Chen, drawing on years of deep-sea experience, guided his team through the challenge. "Humans evolved on a world of extremes," Chen explained afterward, as medical teams checked both species' vital signs. "We don't have a single perfect environment. We adapt to whatever we face." The final trial was designed to be impossible: endurance run through rapidly changing environmental conditions: heat, cold, toxic atmosphere, radiation. The chamber cycled through deadly combinations while participants had to maintain constant movement. "This is where we break them," Vax-Kar predicted. Hour after hour passed. The Craxian champions rotated out as their bodies reached their limits, but the humans kept going. They were clearly suffering. Their vital signs showed extreme stress, but they refused to stop. They took turns supporting each other, sharing supplies, even singing to maintain morale. "Why don't they quit?" one of the Craxian observers demanded. "Their bodies are failing. They must feel the pain." "Of course we feel it," Captain Patel gasped during a brief rest period, her face streaked with sweat. "But humans have a long history of pushing past pain. We do it not because it's easy, but because it's hard." The trial ended not because the humans failed, but because the Craxian medical team insisted on stopping it. The data they gathered defied explanation. The humans had survived conditions that, by all scientific understanding, should have incapacitated them. In his private quarters, Vax-Kar recorded his own report to the High Council. His claws trembled slightly as he composed the message. "The humans possess a form of strength we had not previously encountered," he wrote. "Their physical capabilities, while not matching our own in any single category, demonstrate unprecedented versatility. More concerning is their psychological resilience and their ability to function as a cooperative unit." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "Most troubling is their apparent ability to continue functioning far beyond their theoretical physical limits. They do not stop when their bodies demand it. They simply decide to keep going." The report concluded with a recommendation that shocked the Council. These humans must be considered a potential peer species. Their strength does not lie in their bodies, but in their unrelenting will to overcome any challenge placed before them. In some ways, this makes them more dangerous than any naturally evolved physical advantage. As the Craxian leadership debated the implications of these findings, they had no way of knowing that the true test of both species' capabilities was rapidly approaching. The galaxy held threats that would require more than just strength to overcome. War games gone wrong. Joint military exercises were the logical next step in Craxian-human relations. After the surprising results of the strength trials, both species' military leadership agreed that understanding each other's combat capabilities was crucial. The Craxian battle fleet and Earth's combined space force would engage in simulated combat in the neutral territory of the Arcturus system. Fleet Commander Elena Santos watched from the bridge of the ECS Hyperion as the massive Craxian warships took their starting positions. Her vessel, while advanced by human standards, looked almost delicate compared to their heavily armored hulls. "They still think size equals superiority," her tactical officer, Lieutenant Park, observed. Santos smiled. "Let's show them why that's not always true." The war games began conventionally enough. The Craxian fleet moved in their traditional diamond formation, their strategy refined over centuries of actual combat. They expected the human ships to follow similarly predictable patterns. Instead, the human fleet split into seemingly random groupings, executing maneuvers that the Craxians' combat computers initially flagged as errors. Small, fast attack craft darted between their capital ships, exploiting blind spots that the Craxians hadn't even known existed. "Impossible," Tactical Master Vax-Kar growled from his command post. "Their ships are performing beyond their structural limits." "No, sir," his sensor officer corrected. "They're not exceeding their limits, they're riding them perfectly. Every turn, every burn is calculated to use maximum thrust without braking. It's like they're dancing with disaster." That's when the real disaster struck. The sensor networks of both fleets lit up simultaneously. Unknown vessels were emerging from FTL travel, dozens of them. Their energy signatures matched no known species. "This is not part of the exercise," Santos broadcast on all frequencies. All ships switched to live combat protocols. The unknown ships wasted no time declaring their intentions. They opened fire with weapons that seemed to ignore conventional shields, their energy beams cutting through the outer hull of a Craxian cruiser like it was paper. Multiple hull breaches. The Craxian command channel erupted with damage reports. Their mighty warships, designed to withstand tremendous physical punishment, were vulnerable to this new weapon technology. Santos didn't hesitate. All human ships implement Scatter Protocol Delta. Share targeting data with Craxian vessels. Lieutenant Park, get me a weakness analysis on those ships now. The human fleet's seemingly chaotic movements suddenly made perfect sense. While the Craxian ships tried to maintain their formal battle formations, the human vessels weaved between them, using the larger ships as cover while conducting rapid sensor sweeps of the enemy. Commander Santos to Craxian Command, your ships have superior armor on their ventral surfaces. If you adjust your axis by 15 degrees, we can provide covering fire while you close to effective range. The Craxians, to their credit, adapted quickly. Centuries of combat experience told them to recognize good tactical advice, regardless of its source. The two fleets began moving in concert, Craxian power complemented by human agility. Lieutenant Park's analysis came through just as a second wave of enemy ships appeared. Their weapons generate massive heat signatures before firing. There's a 2-second window where their shields weaken to vent the excess energy. Transmitting targeting data to all ships, Santos ordered. Coordinate fire with Craxian heavy weapons. Time on target in 3, 2, 1. The combined firepower of both fleets, precisely timed to hit during that brief moment of vulnerability, had devastating effects. 3 enemy ships erupted in silent explosions. But the battle was far from over. The unknown vessels released swarms of autonomous combat drones, each barely larger than a human fighter, but carrying the same shield-penetrating weapons. They're targeting our engines, a Craxian captain reported. Standard point defense is ineffective. Switch to manual targeting, Santos commanded her fleet. Their AI can predict automated responses, but they can't predict human intuition. All gunners, you are weapons-free. Trust your instincts. What followed would be studied in military academies of both species for years to come. Human gunners, relying on skills honed through countless simulations and games, proved remarkably effective against the drone swarms. Their seemingly random firing patterns confused the drone's predictive algorithms. Meanwhile, the Craxian ships demonstrated why they were considered the galaxy's premier war vessels. Once they understood the enemy's vulnerabilities, their concentrated firepower was overwhelming. The combination proved decisive. Hours later, as damage control teams from both fleets worked together to repair the worst of the battle damage, Santos met with her Craxian counterpart aboard the Hyperion. Your ships, Battlemaster Zexkar admitted, are piloted with a creativity we had not anticipated. And your gunner's ability to hit targets without computer assistance is remarkable. And your ships, Santos replied, are even more impressive up close than they are on sensors. We would have lost many more vessels without your armor and firepower. The enemy vessels, Zexkar's scales darkened with concern. They were testing us. This was not a random encounter. Santos nodded grimly. No, it wasn't. And they'll be back. The question is, what do we do about it? The answer would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. But first, both species had to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. Neither of them was truly the apex anymore. Only together could they hope to face what was coming. The common enemy. The joint human-Craxian analysis team had been studying the debris from the unknown vessels for 3 months when they made the discovery. Dr. Lisa Chen, daughter of Ambassador Chen, was the first to understand what they were seeing. These aren't ships, she announced to the assembled military leadership. They're organisms, living technology. High Admiral Vexthor's scales paled. Explain. Chen projected a microscopic view of what they'd thought was the enemy vessel's hull material. The entire structure is made of engineered biological components. These aren't pilots using ships. These are entities that grow their own living vessels around themselves. The Swarm, Battlemaster Zexkar named them, his voice heavy with ancient memory. There are legends in our oldest records. Stories of living stars that devoured worlds. The human and Craxian leadership watched in stunned silence as Chen played sensor recordings from the battle. The enemy vessels weren't just repairing themselves. They were adapting, evolving in real time to counter both species' weapons. That's why they tested us, Commander Santos realized. They were gathering biological data, learning our strengths so they could evolve countermeasures. The next attack came faster than anyone expected. The swarm struck simultaneously at 3 colonial systems, 2 human, 1 Craxian. This time, their weapons had evolved to be even more effective against both species' defenses. On New Terra, the largest human colony outside Sol system, Marine Colonel Sarah Martinez led the ground defense when the swarm launched its first planetary invasion. The biological warriors they deployed were nightmarish combinations of organic and technological components. They're not just adapting anymore, Martinez reported through heavy static. They're incorporating DNA from every species they encounter, taking the best traits and weaponizing them. The Craxians' superior physical strength proved vital in close combat with the swarm warriors, but even their legendary endurance had limits. The enemy seemed endless, each defeated unit adding its biological material to the next wave's evolution. That's when humanity's greatest strength, the ability to think laterally and adapt, proved decisive. They're biological, Dr. Chen transmitted from her research station, which means they're subject to biological laws. Every adaptation has a cost. Every evolution creates new vulnerabilities. Working together, human scientists and Craxian biowarfare specialists began to understand the pattern. The swarm's rapid evolution meant they had to maintain an incredibly high metabolism. Their ability to adapt quickly came at the cost of massive energy consumption. They're not invincible, Chen explained to the Joint Military Council. They're burning energy at an unsustainable rate. Each adaptation makes them stronger but increases their need to feed. That's why they're attacking populated worlds. They need biological mass to sustain themselves. The humans' experience with guerrilla warfare and asymmetric combat provided the tactical framework. The Craxians' superior technology and physical capabilities provided the means to execute it. Together, they developed a strategy that would have been impossible for either species alone. We don't have to beat them in direct combat, Santos argued. We just have to force them to adapt until they burn themselves out. The combined fleet put the plan into action at the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Human ships performed increasingly erratic maneuvers, forcing the swarm to constantly evolve new predictive capabilities. Craxian warships hammered them with overwhelming force, compelling further defensive adaptations. Each evolution made the swarm stronger, faster, more deadly, but also more energy-hungry. Their biological ships began to show signs of strain, organic hulls breaking down as they struggled to maintain their enhanced capabilities. That's when they sprung the trap. All ships, execute Operation Firewall, Santos commanded. The human fleet scattered in what appeared to be panic, leaving only the massive Craxian warships in formation. The swarm, sensing weakness, committed fully to the attack. They never saw the human vessels repositioning to create a vast three-dimensional net. Now, the order went out simultaneously in human and Craxian battle languages. Every ship in both fleets activated a specially designed energy pulse, harmless to conventional technology, but devastating to biological systems. The swarm vessels, caught in the crossfire and already strained to their limits, began to break down at the molecular level. The victory was significant but not complete. The remaining swarm vessels retreated into deep space, but everyone knew they would return, stronger and better adapted. Yet something even more important had been achieved. In the aftermath, Vex Thor and Santos stood together on the observation deck of the Joint Command Station, watching the combined fleet conduct rescue operations. Your species, Vex Thor admitted, sees possibilities where we see only obstacles. We would never have conceived of using the enemy's strengths against them in this way. And without your species' strength and technology, Santos replied, We would never have been able to execute the plan. We're stronger together than either of us could be alone. As if to emphasize the point, a human medical ship docked alongside a damaged Craxian cruiser, its crew rushing to assist with casualties. Nearby, Craxian engineering teams were helping repair human vessels, their superior strength making quick work of tasks that would have taken humans days to complete. The swarm had intended to exploit the differences between humans and Craxians. Instead, they had forced both species to recognize how those very differences made them stronger together. Deathworlders united. 1 year after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, the Great Hall of the Craxian High Council witnessed something unprecedented. Humans standing as equals before the assembled lords of what had once been the galaxy's undisputed apex species. The occasion was the formation of the Deathworlder Defense Initiative, DDI, a joint military and scientific organization dedicated to protecting both species from external threats. Ambassador Sarah Chen, now bearing scars from her own encounters with the swarm, addressed the assembly. A year ago, we thought strength was about dominance. We were all wrong. True strength lies in the ability to adapt, to change, to become more than what we were. The changes in both species were already evident. Human ships now incorporated Craxian biomechanical engineering, making them more resilient than ever. Craxian warriors had adopted human tactical flexibility, learning to think beyond their rigid combat doctrines. But the most profound changes were cultural. In the joint training facilities on Mars, Craxian instructors taught human soldiers how to maximize their physical capabilities, while human teachers showed the Craxians how to improvise and think creatively. The results were transformative. Watch, Science Director Krelzar instructed a group of visiting dignitaries. On the training ground below, a mixed team of humans and Craxians was running a combat scenario. The Craxians no longer moved in their traditional phalanx formation, but adapted fluidly to the changing situation. The humans, benefiting from Craxian physical training techniques, demonstrated strength and endurance that would have seemed impossible a year ago. They're becoming something new, Krelzar observed. Neither purely human nor purely Craxian, but a synthesis of both species' best qualities. The diplomatic exchange program, initially met with skepticism from both sides, had produced equally surprising results. Humans living on Craxia Prime had developed new technologies to cope with the crushing gravity, while Craxians on Earth had discovered that their species' legendary focus could be enhanced by human-style creativity. Dr. Lisa Chen, working with a Craxian genetics team, made another breakthrough in understanding the swarm's biology. They're not just evolving randomly, she reported to the DDI Council. There's a pattern to their adaptations. If we can predict it, we can get ahead of their evolution. Battlemaster Zexkar finished her thought. A year ago, he would never have collaborated so closely with a human scientist. Now he recognized that victory required both human insight and Craxian precision. The first test of this new partnership came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected a massive swarm fleet approaching the Arcturus colony. But this time, both species were ready. The combined human Craxian defense force deployed in a formation that would have been impossible a year ago. Human ships, their hulls reinforced with Craxian bioarmor, darted through the enemy fleet with practiced precision. Craxian warships, now capable of the same unpredictable maneuvers as their human counterparts, provided devastating supporting fire. On the ground, mixed combat teams demonstrated why they were now considered the most effective fighting force in known space. Humans and Craxians moved as one, each compensating for the other's weaknesses while amplifying their strengths. The swarm, for all their adaptive capability, found themselves facing an enemy that evolved faster than biological processes would allow. Every time they developed a countermeasure to human tactics, they faced Craxian strength. When they adapted to Craxian power, they encountered human ingenuity. The battle ended in decisive victory, but both species knew it was only the beginning. The galaxy held more threats, more challenges, more opportunities for growth. But now, they would face them together. In the aftermath, High Admiral Vexthor and Commander Santos stood in the same observation room where, a year ago, they had first begun to understand each other. "Do you remember," Santos asked, "when your people thought humans were soft world creatures?" Vexthor's scales rippled with amusement. "And do you remember when humans thought Craxians were just brutes with advanced technology?" "We've come a long way." Santos nodded, watching as human and Craxian ships moved in perfect coordination during the cleanup operation. "No," Vexthor corrected her. "We've only begun. The real question is, what will we become together?" The answer to that question would reshape the galaxy. Already, other species were watching the human-Craxian partnership with a mixture of fear and fascination. The term deathworlder was no longer spoken as a boast or a challenge, but as a recognition of potential. In the Great Hall of the Craxian High Council, a new mural was unveiled, showing human and Craxian figures standing together against a backdrop of stars. Beneath it, in both human and Craxian script, were written the words that would define a new era. "Strength lies not in what we are, but in what we become together." The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps that was the greatest victory of all.